Maya's head throbbed as she slowly regained consciousness. The world around her was dark, the hum of an engine vibrating beneath her. The sharp scent of leather and cologne filled her nostrils. She was in a car, and she wasn't alone. A voice broke the silence. Smooth, calm, dangerous. I expected more from you, Maya. Her blood ran cold. Jonathan Reed. She turned her head, her vision adjusting to the dim lighting. He sat across from her in the back of the SUV, legs crossed, a faint smirk on his lips. His presence alone exuded power and control. Maya forced herself to stay composed. Kidnapping? That's a new low. Jonathan chuckled, shaking his head. Let's not be dramatic. I merely wanted to have a conversation, without interruptions. She shifted in her seat, testing her restraints. None. He wasn't afraid of her running. He thought he had already won. I assume this is about the flash drive, Maya said, keeping her tone even. Jonathan leaned forward slightly. You're playing a dangerous game. That drive contains information that could ruin lives. And not just mine. Maya's jaw tightened. You mean the lives you've already ruined? Jonathan sighed, as if disappointed. You're smart, Maya. I admire that. It's why I offered you an out. But instead, you chose war. She met his gaze, unflinching. I chose justice. Jonathan studied her for a moment before pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen, turning it toward her. The sight made her stomach drop. Carla, bound to a chair, blindfolded, a single light illuminating her terrified face. Maya's breath caught in her throat. You son of a... Jonathan sked, tilting his head. Careful now. I'm not unreasonable. I'm offering you a choice. Maya's fists clenched. What do you want? Jonathan leaned back, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. Simple. Walk away. Hand over the drive. Forget this ever happened, and your friend walks free. Maya's mind raced. If she handed over the drive, Jonathan would erase every shred of evidence. He'd remain untouchable. But if she refused, Carla's life was on the line. Silence stretched between them as the SUV slowed to a stop. Jonathan's smile widened. Time's up, he said. Make your choice. The door opened, the cold night air rushing in. Two men stood outside, waiting. Maya took a slow breath, her pulse pounding her ears. She had only seconds to act. And then she made her move. Maya's pulse thundered in her ears as she stared at Jonathan Reed. His smirk was infuriating, his confidence unshakable. The image of Carla, bound and blindfolded, was burned into her mind. She had no choice. Or at least, that's what he wanted her to believe. Maya wasn't going to play by his rules. She exhaled slowly, forcing herself to appear defeated. Fine, she said, her voice tight. I'll give you the drive. Jonathan's smirk widened. A wise decision. She reached into her jacket pocket, fingers grazing the flash drive. But just as she pulled it out, she made her move. With a sharp flick, she tossed out of the car and into the storm drain beside the curb. Jonathan's smirk vanished. You little... Before he could finish, Maya lunged. She slammed her elbow into the throat of the nearest guard, stunning him, then twisted out of the SUV. She hit the pavement hard, rolling as Jonathan's other goon lunged for her. She scrambled to her feet, adrenaline surging through her veins. Get her! Jonathan roared. Maya sprinted. The city was alive around her. But in that moment, all she could hear was the pounding of her feet against the pavement. She darted through an alley, weaving between dumpsters and fire escapes, her breath ragged. She needed a plan fast. She had bought herself some time, but Carla was still in danger. That was Jonathan's real leverage. He had planned for everything, except for Maya's refusal to break. She ducked into a side street and pulled out her phone. Her fingers trembled as she dialed. Come on, come on. Carla's voice came through, weak but alive. Maya, relief flooded her, but she had no time to celebrate. Where are you? I don't know. They moved me. Some kind of warehouse. There's water nearby. I can hear boats. The docks. Maya's mind raced. I'm coming for you. A sharp voice interrupted. That would be a mistake. Jonathan, the line went dead. Maya's grip tightened around the phone. He still had the upper hand, but not for long. She had one last card to play. She pulled up a contact, the one person who might be able to help, David Holloway. She sent a single message. I need you now. Maya had started this war alone, but she wasn't alone anymore. And Jonathan Reed was about to learn that the hard way. Maya's heart pounded as she waited for a response. The message to David Holloway had been sent, but there was no reply yet. Every second felt like an eternity, and Carla's life hung in the balance. She couldn't afford to wait. She forced herself to think. The docks. Jonathan had taken Carla somewhere near the water. That narrowed it down, but the city had multiple ports. She needed a precise location, and she needed it fast. Her fingers flew across her phone screen as she accessed a backdoor tracking software, something she had installed on Carla's phone months ago for emergencies. A blinking dot appeared on the map. There, a warehouse on the east docks. Isolated, likely guarded. Her breath came fast. She had to be smart. Jonathan would expect her to come alone, but what he didn't know was that Maya had just called in a wild card. A buzz. Finally, a reply from David Holloway. Where are you? Maya wasted no time. East Docks, Warehouse 47. Jonathan as Carla, asterisk, asterisk. The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. Her grip tightened. Seconds later, another message came through. Hold tight. I'm on my way. Asterisk, asterisk. A surge of relief mixed with anticipation. David wasn't just a friend. He was a former private investigator with enough connections to turn the tide. If anyone could help her outmaneuver Jonathan, it was him. But she couldn't wait for backup. Carla didn't have time. She hailed a cab, her mind racing. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about survival. The cab pulled up 2 blocks from the warehouse. Maya slipped out, staying in the shadows. The place was exactly what she expected. Run down, secluded, and eerily quiet. Too quiet. A bad sign. She crept forward, pressing her back against the cool metal of a shipping container. A guard stood near the entrance, gun visible at his side. Jonathan wasn't taking chances. Maya scanned the area. Another guard patrolled the far side. 2 visible. More inside? Likely. Her phone buzzed. David, 5 minutes out. Don't go in alone. Asterisk, asterisk. Too late. Maya inched closer, using the shadows to mask her movements. She had no weapons, but she had the element of surprise. She picked up a loose metal pipe from the ground, testing its weight. It would have to do. Taking a deep breath, she moved. The first guard barely had time to react. She swung the pipe, catching him behind the knee. He crumpled, his weapon clattering to the ground. Maya grabbed it, keeping her movement swift and controlled. 1 down. The second guard turned the corner, just as she raised a gun. His eyes widened. Don't, she warned, voice steady despite the adrenaline. He hesitated, then lunged. A shot rang out. The guard dropped, clutching his leg. Maya exhaled sharply. She hadn't aimed to kill, but she wouldn't let anyone stop her. She stepped over him, gun raised, and pushed through the warehouse doors. Inside, dim lighting cast long shadows over crates and machinery. And in the center, Carla, tied to a chair, struggling against her restraints. Her face turned toward Maya, hope flashing in her eyes. Maya. A slow clap echoed through the space. Jonathan. He stepped out from the shadows, flanked by 2 more guards. Unlike the others, they were ready, guns already drawn. Maya's grip tightened around her weapon. She had come too far to stop now. Jonathan sighed, shaking his head. You never learn, do you? Maya's jaw clenched. Let her go. Jonathan chuckled. Or what? You'll shoot me? He gestured to the guards beside him. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. Maya's heart pounded. She had 1 shot at this. 1 chance. Then a noise behind her. A new voice. David Holloway. Actually, Jonathan, he said, coolly, she's not outnumbered anymore. Jonathan's expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. Maya moved, Jonathan's eyes darted between Maya and David, calculating his next move. The arrogance on his face faltered for just a second, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. David Holloway, Jonathan drawled, his voice laced with amusement. Didn't think I'd see you crawling out of the shadows for this. David stepped forward, gun steady, his expression unreadable. You made a mistake, Jonathan. Jonathan scoffed. And what mistake is that? Maya cut in, voice firm, underestimating me. Jonathan chuckled, shaking his head. Please, you storm in here thinking you're some kind of hero? You're in my world now. He gestured to his guards. And in my world, people like you don't win. Maya tightened her grip on the gun. Carla whimpered behind Jonathan, still tied to the chair. Every second that passed was a risk. David's voice was calm, but there was an edge of warning. You don't have control anymore, Jonathan. The authorities are on their way. Your men are outnumbered. You can't talk your way out of this. Jonathan tilted his head, pretending to consider the words. Then, without warning, he grabbed Carla by the hair, yanking her head back. The guards tensed, waiting for his command. Drop your weapons, Jonathan ordered, his voice sharp, or she dies. Maya's stomach clenched. Carla's eyes were filled with fear, pleading silently for help. Maya flicked her gaze to David, searching for an opening, a way out. David lowered his weapon slightly, but didn't drop it. You won't kill her. Jonathan laughed. You willing to bet her life on that? For a moment, no one moved. The tension thickened, suffocating the air in the warehouse. Then Maya saw it, the slight twitch in Jonathan's fingers. He was bluffing. He needed Carla alive just as much as they did. She was his last leverage. Maya took a slow, measured step forward. You're scared, aren't you? Jonathan's jaw tightened. Don't test me. I already have. She tilted her head. And you're losing. Jonathan's eyes darkened, his grip on Carla's hair tightening for a fraction of a second. That was all Maya needed. With lightning speed, she lunged, knocking Jonathan's hand away. Carla twisted out his grasp. In the same instant, David fired a single warning shot into the air. The sound cracked through the warehouse like thunder. Jonathan's guards hesitated. Drop it, David barked, his voice leaving no room for argument. The guards exchanged glances. Then, one by one, they lowered their weapons. Jonathan, now weaponless and cornered, clenched his fists. His entire empire, his power, was slipping through his fingers. Maya didn't hesitate. She raised her gun and aimed it directly at Jonathan's head. It's over. Jonathan exhaled sharply, his nostrils flaring. You think you've won? A slow smile spread across Maya's face. I don't think. I know. David stepped forward, reaching for his phone. Cops will be here any minute. You can either walk out of here in cuffs or be dragged out unconscious. Your choice. Jonathan's lips curled into something between a sneer and a smirk. You're making a mistake. Maya's eyes narrowed. The only mistake was letting you get away with this for so long. For the first time, Jonathan looked truly rattled. His empire had crumbled. His control was gone. But then, a loud crash from behind. Maya barely had time to react before the warehouse doors burst open. More men, Jonathan's backup, stormed in, guns raised. Jonathan's smirk returned. You didn't think I came unprepared, did you? Maya's pulse skyrocketed. David swore under his breath, shifting to cover her. Carla shrank back, eyes wide with terror. The tables had turned, again. Jonathan dusted off his suit, his confidence fully restored. You had a good run, he mused. But this is checkmate. Maya's hands clenched into fists. No, this wasn't over. Not yet. The air in the warehouse was electric with tension. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as Jonathan's reinforcements stormed in, their guns raised, their expressions unreadable. David adjusted his stance, his jaw tightening as he scanned a new threat. Carla let out a shaky breath, pressing herself against the wall, her body trembling with fear. Jonathan straightened his suit, his smirk returning as he folded his arms. Did you really think I wouldn't have a backup plan? Maya didn't answer. Instead, She shifted her gaze to David, silently calculating their options. They were outnumbered. Escape wasn't going to be easy. But surrender? That wasn't an option. One of Jonathan's men, a broad-shouldered figure with a scar across his jaw, stepped forward. "Boss!" Jonathan gestured lazily toward Maya and David. "Take them out. Leave the girl." A cold wave of fury washed over Maya. He still thought he had control. He still believed he could dispose of them like they were nothing. But he was wrong. So wrong. Before the order could be carried out, a loud siren wailed in the distance. The sound of approaching police cars echoed through the abandoned warehouse, flashing red and blue lights, painting the walls in streaks of color. Jonathan's smirk wavered. His men exchanged uneasy glances. David seized a moment. "Looks like your time is up, Jonathan." Jonathan's jaw clenched, his fingers curling into fists. He turned to his men. "We move. Now!" But it was too late. The warehouse doors burst open. Armed officers flooded in, their voices booming commands. "Drop your weapons." Chaos erupted. Jonathan's men hesitated, some throwing down their weapons while others tried to flee. Maya pressed herself against the wall, shielding Carla as officers stormed the space. Jonathan turned, his face twisting in desperation as he searched for an escape route. But there was none. David stepped forward, his gun still raised. "It's over, Jonathan." Jonathan's eyes flickered with something dark, hatred, fear, regret. But then, just as Maya thought he would surrender, he lunged. Time slowed. Jonathan reached for the gun strapped to his waist. Maya moved on instinct. She didn't hesitate. A single gunshot rang out. Jonathan staggered, his eyes wide in shock. He looked down, his hand clutching his stomach as crimson spread across his shirt. His legs wobbled, and with a heavy groan, he collapsed to his knees. Silence. Maya's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. She had done it. She had finally put an end to him. Officers swarmed in, securing Jonathan as he groaned in pain. The rest of his men were either on the ground or in cuffs. It was over. Finally over. Maya turned to Carla, who was sobbing, relief washing over her. She rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her friend, holding her tightly. David exhaled, lowering his weapon. "You okay?" Maya nodded, even though her hands were still shaking. "Yeah, I am now." Jonathan, bleeding but still conscious, lifted his head, his expression twisted with bitterness. "You think you've won?" His voice was weak, but filled with venom. Maya stepped closer, looking down at him. "I didn't think I won, Jonathan." Her lips curled into a small, victorious smile. "I know I did." The officers hauled him up, dragging him toward the exit. He struggled weakly, but there was nothing left for him to fight for. His empire had crumbled. His power was gone. And the final blow? Knowing that Maya Carter was the reason he had lost everything. Maya turned to David, the weight of everything settling in her chest. "It's really over." David gave a small, knowing nod. "Almost." But just as Maya allowed herself to breathe, just as she let herself feel the victory, one of the officers shouted, "He's got a knife." Maya barely had time to react before Jonathan, with the last of his strength, yanked a blade from one of the fallen guards and lunged straight for her. Jonathan lunged, the blade gleaming under the dim warehouse lights. Time seemed to freeze as Maya's breath caught in her throat. But she wasn't the same woman who had walked into Lexington and Company 3 years ago. She wasn't the same woman who had been humiliated and cast aside. She was stronger, sharper, and she was ready. With a swift sidestep, she dodged Jonathan's wild attack. The knife sliced through empty air, and before he could recover, David charged forward, tackling him to the ground. The weapon clattered the floor as officers swarmed in, pinning Jonathan down. Maya stared down at him, chest heaving, adrenaline still pumping through her veins. Jonathan's once arrogant eyes were now filled with desperation. He had lost everything. His company, his power, his freedom, and worst of all, his pride. "Get him out of my sight," Maya said coolly. The officers dragged Jonathan away, his struggles futile. His reign of terror was over. Maya turned to Carla, who was wiping away tears of relief. David exhaled, shaking his head. That was too close. Maya nodded, steadying herself. It's over now. But the real victory was yet to come. 1 week later, the board of directors at Lexington and Company gathered for an emergency meeting. With Jonathan removed, the company needed new leadership. Investors whispered, employees speculated, but deep down, many already knew what was coming. As the doors of the boardroom opened, all eyes turned to the woman stepping inside, Maya Carter. She walked in with grace, confidence radiating from her. The same room where she had once been overlooked, dismissed, and disrespected was now the place where she would take her rightful seat. The chairman stood, clearing his throat. Maya Carter, after careful deliberation, the board has reached a unanimous decision. He paused, offering a knowing smile. We would like to officially appoint you as the new CEO of Lexington and Company. A hush fell over the room before applause erupted. Maya took a slow breath, absorbing the weight of the moment. The woman who had been fired without a second thought was now in charge of the entire company. The tables had turned in a way no one could have predicted. She stepped forward, placing her hands on the table, her gaze steady. Thank you, she said. I accept. As she took her seat at the head of the table, her mind drifted back to the moment she had been escorted out of this building, humiliated and heartbroken. That day, she had thought it was the end. But now she knew better. It had been the beginning. Jonathan had fired her, believing she was nothing. But now, she was his replacement, the ultimate justice. Racist boss fires black employee. Next day, she returns as a CEO. And that, my friends, is how karma works. If you love this story, make sure to hit that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Let's talk. What did you think of Maya's revenge? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.